HOA stole my private parking for their expansion, so I sued for 6 figures in Hoscherthast lobby. I woke up to the sound of a jackhammer vibrating through my coffee mug, but it wasn't coming from the street. It was coming from my driveway. When I pulled back the curtains of my Willow Creek home, I didn't see a utility repair crew. I saw orange pylons cordoning off the back 30 feet of my private deeded parking path, the extra space I'd paid a $15,000 premium for when I bought this end-unit townhouse 5 years ago. Beyond the dust, a construction crew was already pouring forms for what looked like a structural extension of the HOA's main clubhouse lobby. My heart didn't race, it went cold. I stepped outside in my bathrobe, clutching a copy of my original closing documents. The foreman didn't even look up from his clipboard. He just pointed a thumb toward the clubhouse. "Talk to Mrs. Gable," he said. "We're just following the blueprints for the new Grand Welcome Center. This area is marked as a common element now." I looked at the stakes driven into my asphalt. They hadn't just taken a few inches, they had effectively deleted my ability to park my second car or have guests over. If they poured that concrete, my property value wouldn't just dip, it would crater. The injustice wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. As I watched the wet cement mixer back down the narrow lane toward my land, I realized the HOA wasn't asking for an easement. They were staging a land grab in broad daylight, betting that I wouldn't have the stomach or the bank account. To stop a community improvement project I had exactly 4 hours before my private property became a permanent part of their foundation. Clubhouse lobby was cool, quiet, and smelled of expensive sandalwood. Behind a mahogany desk sat Diane Gable.
Good afternoon, David.
She was 50,
Thank you for coming
impeccably
in. How can I
dressed in a
assist you
tailored
today?
cream suit
I
and
appreciate
possessed
your
a
patience
smile
with
that
this
never
matter.
quite reached her
We're committed
eyes.
to resolving it efficiently.
To the rest of the neighborhood, she was the visionary, transforming our tired community into a luxury enclave. To me, she was the woman currently destroying my driveway. "David, come in," she said, her voice like silk. "I assume you've seen the progress. The new Grand Welcome Center is going to add at least 5% to every unit's valuation. It's a win for everyone." "You're pouring concrete on my deeded parking pad, Diane," I said, placing my property survey on her desk. "That's private land. I have the title right here. You didn't even send a notice." She didn't blink. She didn't even look at the paper. "We sent a community-wide memo regarding the common area realignment 3 months ago. Per Section 4.2 of the bylaws, the board has the right to repurpose underutilized exterior spaces for the benefit of the association. That clause applies to guest spots and green belts," I countered, my voice low and steady. "Not land I pay. Property taxes on your encroaching on a private lot." Diane leaned forward, her expression shifting from patronizing to predatory. "The board's legal counsel has already reviewed the plat maps, David. That parking pad was a developer error from the 90s. It should have been a common area from the start. We're simply correcting a historical mistake. If you obstruct the contractors, we'll be forced to fine you $500 a day for interfering with community improvements." She checked her watch, dismissing me without a word. As I walked out, I saw the cement trucks shoot swing over my property line. This wasn't a clerical error. Diane wanted a grander entrance for her legacy project, and my parking spot was the only thing in her way. She figured I'd grumble, pay the fines, and eventually accept a sorry in the form of a free pool pass. She was wrong. This was a deliberate, calculated theft of equity. I spent the next 48 hours in a fever dream of microfiche and property records at the county registrar's office. Diane was banking on the developer error defense, a common HOA tactic used to steamroll residents. If the original 1994 master deed was messy, she could claim the land was always intended for the association. I spent $1,200 on an emergency boundary survey. I dug through my paper trail box and found the certified letter from my 2019 purchase, where the HOA itself had confirmed the parking pad was a limited common element for the exclusive use of Unit 14. It was signed by the previous board president. But Diane's legal team had already anticipated that. They argued that exclusive use didn't equal ownership, and the board could revoke usage rights at any time for structural community enhancements. By Thursday, the lobby's foundation was set. Steel rebar poked out of the ground where my car used to sit. My lawyer, a shark named Miller, looked at the bylaws and sighed. "David, Section 8.4 gives them broad power for aesthetic uniformity. If we sue, they'll drag this out for 3 years. You'll spend $80,000 in legal fees just to win back a slab of asphalt they've already built a building on. The court rarely orders a demolition for a few feet of encroachment. They usually just award fair market value, maybe 10 grand. I felt the air leave my lungs. I had lost. Diane had won. I walked out of Miller's office, ready to give up, when I stopped by the county clerk's archived easements desk one last time. I asked for the utility maps from the 1970s, before the townhomes were even built. That's when I found the gold mine that the HOA lobby expansion wasn't just sitting on my parking pad. According to a 1974 high-pressure gas main easement, the exact coordinates of the new Grand Welcome Center sat directly atop a primary regional gas artery. The easement explicitly forbade any permanent masonry structures. Within 20 feet of the line to allow for emergency excavation, the HOA hadn't just stolen my land. They had built a massive concrete tomb over a ticking regulatory time bomb. And because I owned the underlying land, I was the only person with the standing to report the encroachment to the utility company and the fire marshal. I didn't call Diane. I didn't send a warning email. Instead, I spent Friday morning at the county clerk's office filing a lis pendenza, formal notice of a pending lawsuit that effectively freezes the title of any property it's attached to. Then, I made 2 phone calls, one to the regional gas utilities compliance officer and one to the county fire marshal. Monday morning, the construction site was buzzing. The Grand Welcome Center was framed out, a sprawling skeleton of steel and wood, sitting proudly on my former parking pad. Diane was there with a local news crew, ready to film a segment on suburban revitalization. Here is what they didn't. No dot at 9 a.m. sharp. A white utility truck and a red SUV with government plates pulled into the cul-de-sac. Out stepped a technician with a ground-penetrating radar and a fire marshal with a clipboard. I walked over my survey and the 19 easement map in hand. "The structure is right here," I said, pointing to the footings. The technician's face went pale as his sensor began to chirp. "Sir," he said to the fire marshal, "this building is sitting less than 3 feet from a 12-inch high-pressure main. If there's a tremor or a leak, we can't get a backhoe in here to stop the neighborhood from leveling." Diane tried to intervene, her polished persona cracking. "This is a private community project. We have permits. Your permits are based on a fraudulent site plan that omitted this easement," the fire marshal barked. He turned to the foreman. "Shut it down now and get everyone out of that building." I handed Diane a manila envelope. Inside was a summons for a $450,000 lawsuit for timber trespass. They'd cut my ornamental maples, illegal encroachment, and clouding of title. But the real blow was the immediate cease and desist order from the utility company. "Do this," Diane hissed, her voice trembling. "We've already spent $200,000 on the foundation alone." "Then you should have checked the maps before you stole my driveway," I said. The panic on Diane's face wasn't instant, but the realization was systemic. Because I had filed the lis pendens, the HOA's master insurance policy was immediately flagged. When the provider saw a structural encroachment on a high-pressure gas line, they didn't just hike the rates, they canceled the policy for the entire complex. Within 48 hours, every homeowner in the neighborhood received a notice from their mortgage lender, proof of HOA, insurance required within 30 days or your loan is in default. The Grand Welcome Center became a tomb of wasted capital. A week later, a court-ordered demolition began. I sat on my porch with a fresh coffee, watching a hydraulic breaker smash the concrete slab Diane had so arrogantly poured over my land. The HOA didn't just lose the building, they were hit with a $185,000 restoration and hazard mitigation fine from the utility company, plus my 6-figure settlement for the temporary seizure of my property and the destruction of my landscaping. Diane was ousted in a special emergency meeting 3 weeks later. She had to sell her own unit to cover the personal liability lawsuits from neighbors whose home values had tanked during the insurance freeze. She left in a U-Haul, avoiding eye contact with the man whose parking spot she thought was underutilized. The lesson is simple. Authority is a tool, not a weapon. When you weaponize the rules against someone who actually reads them, you're just handing them the blueprints for your own demolition. My parking pad is back, the asphalt is fresh, and the silence in the neighborhood has never sounded so good.